Hi, everybody. So, the usual mic check, as we have viewers on Twitch, on YouTube. Can you hear me? Please respond in chat. So, Stefan, can you hear me? Good. Yes, from YouTube. That's good. Then Twitch should also work. Good. It's time. Let's get started. So, if I can get StreamYard under control. So, hi everybody. Welcome to today's .NET meetup. Our March 2022 meetup. Thank you all for joining today. Yep. Once again, we have a cool topic. Who are we? Who organizes these meetups? We are the .NET Devs.at. We are a non-profit organization that's about sharing and the knowledge and experience about .NET technology in Austria and also now in the world. We have multiple locations where you can find us. We have a homepage, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, and we have also a Slack channel. And I will try to post all these links to the chat. Yeah. I also want to thank our sponsors, the normal four, so OGS Software Services, Theater Every, and Rubicon, who supports us financially, that we can do these meetups. So StreamYard, subscription, and so on. Hopefully soon hardware that we can for the in-person events. And also I want to thank JetBrains, who gave us every month a 12 months product license that we can raffle. What we will do also, it's easy. At the end of the webinar, of the talk, we will raffle one license, and to be part of the raffle, someone during the talk, please write hashtag JetBrains in the chat, and then we will draw some lucky winner, perhaps also two, because we have too much licenses. We have some on stock that we would need to get rid of. So please, we want to give them away. It's a 12 months product license, also for ReSharper Ultimate, which includes ReSharper.cover and everything you want. Yeah, that's that part. Other thing is what we also raffle in our feedback form at the end are, we still have some cool t-shirt, Hey Friends t-shirt from Scott Hanselman. I have still 2 blue ones and dark red one. So please fill out the feedback form at the end, and then we raffle also these. 2 of these we already raffled, and 3 we got left. Some quick news from the community first. Our meetup is part of the .NET Foundation, and you probably heard it a lot already in the last years. They have this .NET Virtual User Group, where a lot of other user groups around the world are posting their meetups. So if you want to get more .NET content, please join this meetup group. The other news is more relevant for our Austrian viewers. Is still we got a new, if you heard it perhaps last time, we got a new IT Kollektivvertrag with beginning of this year. Perhaps this is interesting for you to check your base salaries. And the other thing for us Austrian, so perhaps we will get an Asia region in Austria somewhen. There's tomorrow update event from Microsoft to where they updated was the current status, and so perhaps this is interesting for you. And the second one is they have some currently running some Spring Skills challenge where you get some free certificates and also can win some backpacks. Let's see if this link works in chat and comes complete. Yeah, sorry YouTube, the link is not complete. It's two chat messages. You need to combine these, or you use the one you have here on the screen. And yeah, quick update to our plans for the future for the meetups. Yeah, the having in-person events got a little bit moved back to May, June. Let's see how the numbers are developing here in Austria and in Vienna. But it still will be a hybrid event, so it will be on location and we will stream. So if you don't feel comfortable to be somewhere in a location, you can still watch us on stream. And depending if the testing is still free of charge, there will be so 2G plus. So depending, the PCR test is only needed if you can get it free. Let's see about. They are changing every week the plans, so let's see how long they are still free. And with that, I'm done with the intro, a little bit longer one, and I'm happy to announce that we have today Luce with us with her talk Zero to Document Hero in Introduction to MongoDB and .NET. I'm personally looking forward to it because I never had a chance to play around with MongoDB. So, Luce, it's your stage.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So first of all, I apologize for how I sound. I'm actually sick at the moment, but hopefully we'll be able to get through this. Don't panic. If something goes wrong, you can't understand me, or I suddenly start coughing so much, we have to give up. I've given this talk before. It's recorded on YouTube. So if all else fails, we have a YouTube video to go to. But fingers crossed, we'll get through today without too many problems. So this is going to be Zero to Document Hero, an intro to MongoDB and .NET. So it kind of is a bit of a high level talk, only because there is so much to cover that it can be quite difficult to fit into one sort of 50 to 60 minute talk. But we'll give it a go. So I'm Luce Carter. I am a developer advocate for MongoDB themselves, which is why I'm rocking this rather cool employee hoodie. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and a Twilio champion. And you can find me on Twitter at LuceCarter1. If you've got any questions or anything like that afterwards, it is the best place to reach out to me. But don't worry, my Twitter handle will appear on every slide. So if you don't get a chance to capture it now, don't worry. So let's start off by talking about my history with databases. Well, it all starts back in 2009. I went to a further education college here in the UK, and this is where I did an IT course, purely IT, and we were introduced to databases and, more specifically, Microsoft SQL, because like you find still to this day, a lot of the time when it comes to databases in .NET, everyone just goes to SQL. Then in 2010, I went to university here in Manchester, where we started to learn about Oracle SQL, and they gave us this really fat textbook to follow, which just took us through all the different, basic all the way up to advanced commands and operations. Then in 2015, once I'd graduated university and been in my job as a software development graduate for a few months for the Japanese IT firm Fujitsu, I first learned about some other flavors of SQL, which are Postgres and SQLite.net. So SQLite.net came into my life because of Xamarin, the cross-platform mobile development, .NET cross-platform development framework. Love it, one of my favorites. But yeah, that's how I discovered SQLite.net. And then PostgreSQL was kind of cool. It came into my life because I was doing some stuff with those Android Google Glass devices that they had a few years ago for the Ministry of Justice here in the UK, which oversees the police. So we pitched a proof of concept to them, which was an app where it was location aware. The police officers would wear these glasses, and as they walked around, if they were near the location from the police database of a known criminal, it would pop up in their little heads up display and let them know just a little summary of who it is and what they're known for. Of course, we didn't have access to the real police database, so Postgres came into my life as a really good open source database that we could use. Then in 2017, after being sick of working in a job that after a while involved me traveling to and from where I lived for 10-hour train travel every week, I started at the BBC. And that's where I was introduced to cloud computing and specifically Amazon's RDS or relational database system. The BBC, interesting fact, is actually the largest, well, it was at the time, the largest user of a different number of AWS services of any company in the world. The only company to use more AWS than we did, not in number of services, but just the amount of money they spend, is actually Netflix, believe it or not. But yeah, that's where I discovered RDS. So that was cloud databases. But again, it's still always been SQL. Even though it's been different platforms and different technologies, it's always ended up being SQL. And then in 2021, I started my job as a developer advocate here at MongoDB. And full transparency, I hadn't actually used document databases really before starting at MongoDB. Well, I didn't think I had anyway. And I'd heard of MongoDB, but I certainly not used their products. So, that says a lot about the company, really. I still got the job anyway, which is cool. And now I love them. And we get to go on this journey together where I kind of show you how I, got my head around learning all this stuff. Because as I said, I only started learning about it in 2021. So it's all kind of new for me as well. And I've had to kind of go from this SQL mindset over to document databases. So George Bernard Shaw once said, progress is impossible without change, and those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. And I think that's quite important because from my experience, whether it's for myself or from developers in the community that I speak to, one of the biggest blockers that people come across is their SQL mindset, the way they think in relationships and tables. And I get it. Some of us have been using databases and SQL for 10, 20, even longer years. So it does take a kind of a mindset shift. But yeah, it is possible, and we can find out a little bit of how to do it. So what we're going to talk about today? Well, first of all, we're going to discuss what tables versus documents. We'll try and do a little bit of mapping of terms between the two, because I found personally, for me, I found that really helpful when I was trying to work my way between the two. Then we'll talk about, why MongoDB? Why should I even consider moving over to something like MongoDB and document databases? Then we'll have a look at .NET with MongoDB. That's why we're here. We can, it's all good learning about these things in theory, but, let's have a look at what we can do with .NET and MongoDB. And then finally, we'll have a look at MongoDB in action because, I can show you some basic things, but let's see some actual genuine real world cool uses of MongoDB in the real world that you may or may not even know is a thing. But, it might just make you realize that it's a viable option for you, especially if you're starting a new project. So let's start off with our first point, which is tables versus documents. Well, the first question we kind of have to ask ourselves is, what is a document? Apologies. Well, a document, it's normally a JSON or JavaScript object, okay? Ooh. talks about, oh, it's fun. But yeah, so a document is normally a JavaScript object notation object. So it will be surrounded by curly brackets. And then you have field value bears, or the field you might know as key. So it's key value, field value, property value, whatever you know it as. It comes in two pieces. This is the name on the left, the identifier, and then the value on the right. But that's all well and good in theory. Let's actually look at it a bit more in detail. So this might seem like a really strange picture to share, me in the gym. But the reason I put this picture here is because when I was thinking about kind of, how can I kind of look at a real world example to help me map between the two, I was thinking about, real world examples that I could run through. And it got me thinking about Phil. So Phil here is my personal trainer. And, I realized that actually, Phil has data, right? He has clients and he has sessions and all that stuff. So maybe I could think about how Phil would map that data between a relation, how it would look in a relational database and how it would look in a document database. So let's go through it. So the first thing, of course, if this is a relational database world, we would start off with clients table. You have the client would have an ID, which normally would be the primary key or the unique value. Then we'd have columns for the other information. So name, maybe number of sessions a week, and a phone number. And then in a document, this would be much simpler, right? You've got your two curly brackets either side. Then you've got the ID. So this underscore ID might look a bit strange, but underscore ID is just a unique, it's the unique identifier that MongoDB uses in their documents. And what's cool, as we'll see later on, actually, is that technically MongoDB documents are more than just JSON documents. But we've got the ID, we've got the name, we've got the number of sessions, and we've got the phone number. So a much, quite simple mapping here. A table maps to a document. A table maps to something called a collection. And then in the collection, you have a collection of documents, and each document would be the equivalent of a row in a table. But, you're going to store more information than that, right? You're not just the clients, but one of the things that every client has when they go to get a personal trainer, right, is not just something you wake up one day and decide to do it. It's normally because you have goals. So we can also think about how we'd map this. So in a relational world, you'd have to start having a separate table. And this is where it starts to get more complicated because for now, two tables is okay. But eventually you're going to end up potentially with lots of tables, and you have to do expensive joins to meet the two together. We will get through this. So you've got the goals. You can see here, these are my genuine goals, which is run 5 kilometers, which I can do. Build muscle, I very much do. Complete a pull-up. Not so much yet, but we'll get there. But, you can see you've got the columns again in each table, and we've got the client ID to map to the primary key in the client's table, so we can start doing those joins. It can get quite expensive to do joins, but it's how we form the relationships. But in documents, it's much easier, right? We don't need to worry about separate tables or separate documents. We have a saying, which is data that's accessed together should be stored together, right? Goals are mapped to a client. There's no point having them separate. So you might as well keep them together in the same document. And as I mentioned, MongoDB is more than just JSON documents. It's actually something called BSON, which is binary JSON, which means that it looks like JSON, reads like JSON, but it's actually stored as binary under the hood, which means that it supports more data types than just your basic JSON object, as you can see here with the array. So you can have arrays, you can have dates, you can have numbers, you can have more than just the basic data types. You can even have what we call embedded documents. So that's actually objects within the document. So you can have, hierarchies essentially if you need it. So here we have an array of strings, but we can, but it means that because they make sense together, we keep them together. So we've got a list of goals, and it's associated with me by being in my document. Cool. And then beyond that, you might have, well, we've got goals and you've got clients, but you might want to know, well, what exercise are you going to do to help move towards those goals? So we have exercises. So again, we can use the foreign key of client IDs that we can map the client to these exercises. So it has its own unique ID for the exercises, and they have a name, total set, and the total of number of reps. And that's great, but because it's in a table in separate columns, you then got the problem of, well, they don't really mean much separately. Like, they're stored together in a table, but they make more sense to be kept together. And that's where these embedded documents I mentioned come into play. So we can have an exercises array, but inside of that, it is an array of objects. So for each object, you've got the name of the exercise, the number of sets you'll do, the number of reps you'll do in each set. Because they're all on their own, they're all useless. The name of the exercise is pointless when you don't know how many you're going to do. And sets is useless when you don't know how many of them you're going to do. And reps, well, how many times are you going to do those reps? Again, without the name, you don't know what you're doing. They're all very much linked together. So it's important to store them together in the one document. Data that is accessed together should be stored together. But of course, I'm not going to be Phil's only client. In fact, my friend Chris, she introduced me to Phil. And so Phil might also have other clients. So we've got Chris. But Chris and Phil live near each other, and they don't actually need to share phone numbers to arrange sessions. Chris is very careful about personal data and chooses not to give out a phone number. Now, in a relational database world, that would mean having to put null. But no one likes null, right? Because null can either mean unknown or not yet known. And they discourage null. So, what do you do when you have information that you don't know what it's going to be? Well, that doesn't matter with document databases because they've got a flexible schema. If you really want a schema, because you know what your data is going to look like and you insist that it shouldn't change, you can define a schema put a schema in with schema validation, but you don't need to. It can be flexible, which is great when you imagine you're prototyping an application or it's evolving and you don't necessarily strictly know what the data is going to be, right? You want it to be able to change. And so in this case, the fact that Chris doesn't have a phone number doesn't matter. It's fine. You just store the document, Chris's document, without the phone number in it. It won't break anything. Nothing will blow up. No one needs to panic. We just carry on nicely. And again, Chris will also have her own goals and exercises related to that. And so all the other data in this document looks pretty much identical. The values might be different, but the fields are the same. We just don't worry about the phone number. And that's pretty cool because when you think about relational databases now, if you want to add new columns or make changes, if the data is unknown for certain records for a new column, you'd have to set them as null. And a lot of, and also when you want to make a change to your database, you have to take it offline, make the change and bring it back up again. Not the case with MongoDB, you just carry on. So let's just have a quick look at the term mapping summary. So as we saw, a row maps to a document. So every document is equivalent of a row in your table. Then every column maps to a field that we saw. So, those column names match to the field names. A table is a collection. The same as a table is a group of rows. A collection is a group of documents. A database is still a database. An index is still an index used for things like read queries. A view is a view. A join you don't really need because you can use embedding, but it is kind of the equivalent. And then a transaction is a transaction. Now, you don't necessarily have to start worrying about transactions. MongoDB, despite what some myths suggest from olden times, very much supports ACID transactions. But you'll actually find that if you model your data in the right way, you probably won't need it anyway. But that's a whole other talk in itself. And in fact, my now former colleague, Lauren Schaefer, who is now the head of developer advocacy at Grammarly, she put this amazing picture together, but she actually does a talk similar to this, but dedicated solely to moving from tables to documents, that does a lot on data modeling. So if you're interested, I've got a link to Lauren's Twitter at the end, and you can kind of go and have a look. But, overall, it's a fairly straightforward mapping. And I do share a link to the slides at the end, so don't worry if you want to have a look at this picture later on. The slides are available online. So we've looked a little bit of the theory about how you might begin to map between the different terms, and we've also seen a little bit about why you might just move to documents. But specifically, why MongoDB? Well, MongoDB and document databases make life easier. Now, I should probably put an asterisk in my opinion here, but honestly, I do genuinely feel that. As .NET developers, we're very much used to, things like JSON. So it's pretty cool. And I know it's a beast on document, not JSON, but they look the same, right? It's a slower learning curve. So it's got high availability. As I mentioned, because, you don't need to take the database offline to make any changes to it. Even things like stuff that we'll see later on involving horizontal scaling, that can actually be done live now, which means that your database doesn't even need to go offline. So there's really high availability. We've also got some really clever things going on under the hood, such as replica sets. So for each cluster that you deploy, you won't have to worry about this, but it automatically takes care of it for you. But each cluster is a replica set of 3 nodes, a primary and 2 secondaries, and it replicates the data between all 3. If the primary goes down for whatever reason, it just comes in and goes, hey, I'll do a very quick vote behind the scenes and make one of the secondaries a primary, and that means that it will just take care of it, make it the primary. You won't know any different, and it will spin up another secondary. So high availability. Flexibility, as you saw, it is a flexible schema. As a SQL developer, you might be panicking at the thought of no schema, but you don't really need it anyway. But you have the flexibility that you can adapt, and that makes it great for getting started with, and as I said, prototyping your applications. So scalability verticals. So like with SQL, with your servers, if you if you need your needs for the server increasing because you're getting much more traffic for whatever reason, not necessarily malicious like DDoS, but maybe you're just getting popular. Vertical scaling means you just add more hardware. So it might be more RAM, it might be a better CPU, it might be more hard drive space, whatever it is, you just vertically stack by adding more components. But the problem with that, right, is that there is a ceiling. Eventually, you can't put any more hardware in the server. And also the costs aren't linear. Let's be honest. Once you start needing more upscale hardware requirements, it gets very, very expensive. But, MongoDB does support vertical scaling if required. But one of the advantages it has over things like SQL and relational databases is horizontal scaling. So with relational databases, because of the way that things are stored in tables or relationships, it's not really possible to spread the tables across different servers. So horizontal scaling traditionally has not really been possible. But with MongoDB, it certainly is. You can have versions of your replica sets and clusters in multiple places. We even support multi-cloud and multi-region deployments should you choose, which means that your data is all over the place. We also have something called sharding, which means, think of it a bit like a library where you go in and everything's split up into rows of author, normally by author surname or subject area and author surname. And then, when you want to find a certain book, you know where to go to find that book and to get out what you want. Sharding works very similarly. You pick a sharding key, which is, the equivalent of the author surname, and you say, okay, this is what we're going to split the data up on, and it will just split it up for you. And then this, there'll be a configuration server that will hold information like, where to go and find what you want. So everything's spread out horizontally. It means that if you're doing a lot of high write traffic, it's good for that because you're only having to update that one shard and not all the shards. So, you've got lots of different options for spreading your workloads out, either across shards or across multiple cloud providers or multiple regions. And so it's always there, to scale horizontally. And if you, as you'll see later on with the cloud, if you use the cloud, it will take care of it all for you. So brilliant. And then there's readability. So as I mentioned, JSON is not new to us. JSON style documents aren't new to us. If you're used to any of the C family programming languages like C#, C++, PHP, Go, ones like that, JSON isn't new. So, it's got very quick, low barriers to entry because it's documents a shape of data that you're used to working with. I don't know about you, but I've lost count a number of times I've had to do a new .NET Core project, for example, and have to do an HTTP client and start pulling in data, and it always comes back as a JSON. So you have to, parse the JSON into a class and all that stuff. JSON is not new to us, so it makes documents really readable out of the box. So now I want to talk about Atlas. And by Atlas, I don't mean a map. I don't mean the god. I actually get to go to New York in June for MongoDB World, and I'm very excited. I might go to Rockefeller Center and actually take my own photo of Atlas here. But no, what I mean is MongoDB Atlas, our cloud-hosted application data service. At the core of it is a database as a service, but it does so much more than that. Don't worry too much if this picture looks a little bit small. We will be having a look at it properly shortly. But out of the box, you can really easily deploy databases and, get playing with the data straight away. There's lots of information just here on the homepage of Atlas, including things like read and write, the data size, the version of MongoDB that you're running, the region that you're in, what tier you're running. So M0 here is our free forever tier. This is using the standard replica set 3 nodes. If you're using a paid tier, this is where you can set sharding, and you'd see sharding here instead. So loads of really interesting things, and these graphs would actually have active lines on them if they were having stuff going on, and we will see this shortly. And then this is our, this is the actual homepage. So this is how you go ahead and build a database. Now, this is a video. There's no audio or anything, so don't worry. But this is a video I made just because, sometimes things go wrong and it's easier to just show you a video. So this is what you'd see the first time you come into Atlas if you've not got a database. So you can pick the free tier here. You can have one free tier per project. So if you have an organization and you want multiple free tiers, just create a new project. Then you can pick the cloud provider and the region nearest to you. One of the things you'll see here is that we support AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure. Since recording this video, as I mentioned, we've actually now, as of MongoDB 5, we support multi-region deployment. So you can actually deploy to multiple of these if your use case require it. You can then go ahead and give your cluster a name if you want, or leave it as a default cluster 0. Then there's other settings like whether it backs up, what version of MongoDB it runs. As of about 2 weeks ago, we did actually move to now all M0 clusters use MongoDB 5, which is our latest. Now, it will go ahead and create the cluster for you based on the settings you gave it. This does take a few minutes, so you just have to use your imagination and pretend you can hear the SpongeBob a few moments later, because it won't share sound. But yeah, a few moments later, you'll end up with a database. And then what you can do here is you can actually load the sample data set. So one of the great things is that if you just want to play around with the data, or you want to test the connections, or you don't have any data yet, you can just load our sample data set. We'll have a look through it in a minute, but it is very impressive. There's lots of different tables and different collections with all sorts of different shaped data, from everything from complex to quite simple. So you've got really good use cases to try and get around with. But again, loading the sample data set takes a few minutes. So I recorded it, and then we've got SpongeBob, and then the sample data set is loaded. And you can see here that these connection and read and write graphs have actually got lines on them because there was some activity when the data set was loaded. So let's actually have a quick browse. So if we switch over to here, welcome to Atlas. So this is Atlas under my organization. And this is the same sample data set, I believe, actually, that you actually saw me in the video. It has auto updated to 5.0.6. So what's really cool, even though it's a free tier, as I mentioned, we rolled out support for MongoDB 5 for the free tiers a couple of weeks ago, but we took care of updating it for you. So you don't even have to worry about it. It just did it under the hood. So we can have a look, there's a bit of information here about stuff that's gone on with it. And there, in the last couple of hours, there was connections. But what's cool is that there's actually different ways to browse your data. So we can go in and we can just have a look here. So this is called the Atlas Data Explorer. And it means, let's just zoom in a bit, that you can actually browse the data here within your browser. You don't even need to worry about going elsewhere for it. Just have a look. So we have a games database here with things like Uno, Carcassonne, and Monopoly. But then you can see here we've got all these databases and collections, starting with the name sample. And that comes from the sample data set. And that one of the things I think is cool is that you've got the sample data sets here, but you've also got my own from a project that we'll see shortly. Because you don't have to wipe out the sample data set. You can leave it there in your database for as long as you need, if you want it there to refer to, which is awesome. So you've got things like Airbnb, so that gives you like listings and reviews, so it gives you loads and loads. So there you go, there's 5,555 documents with, all sorts of different things here. We've got IDs, notes, transit, house rules, different bits of information. So you've got stuff that you can play around with, and there's even more fields. There's even arrays of all sorts of things. So you've got images which point to blob storage. So this is a really good example, actually. If you want to store images, you can just store them in blob storage and things like an S3 bucket or an Azure blob storage container, and just save the URL to it inside of your document. And then you've got other ones here. So we've got Netflix is another good one. So it's kind of like a Netflix meets IMDb. So we can have a look at, say, movies, and there's a whole collection of all sorts of movies here with genres. So it gives you it could have multiple genres, for example. So it's an array. You've got the array as a cast. Yeah, all sorts of different bits of information. And it's all there. I won't spend too much time going through it, as I said, because it's there free out the box in Atlas. All you have to do is load the sample data set. So if you want to have a browse, just go through the sample data set. So that's one way of looking at it inside of the collection. Well, what other ways can we have a look? Well, if you want a standalone application, but you don't want to do it in the browser, we can use something called MongoDB Compass. And Compass is our GUI application. So if we go ahead here and connect to this cluster, this is the same cluster that we're browsing in Edge there. And so you've got the games database, and again, I'll zoom in. This is kind of small, but you've got the games database that you saw, and you've got all those sample things. So you can go ahead and browse through here. And what's good about this is that you can do a little bit more than you could just in the Data Explorer. Things like aggregations. So MongoDB has this idea of aggregation framework, which is kind of like almost like a conveyor belt in a factory. You can build a pipeline of stages that do things to your data, much more, that can go much more beyond the basics that you can do with, say, a find. Again, so you could do a whole talk on aggregation framework, but what's clever here is that all these different stages that you can do, like we can do a dollar match, and say match on, like, I don't know, let's see, what can we do? Minimum nights of 3. I might just put that in quotes. There you go. So, it's gone ahead and already filtered it into ones that are the only ones that have a minimum night of 3. But then that becomes an output for your next stage. So then you can add another stage that says, okay, well, we've filtered it down to be only the ones with minimum nights of 3 stays, but maybe we want to do, something like Okay, I can't remember some of them. But yeah, basically you can, as I said, could go on and give a whole talk on aggregation framework, but it's very powerful. But what I like about using Compass is that you can go ahead and build your framework here. if you like if you like the visual aid and being able to kind of get an idea of what's going to be in the output for the next stage, this is really helpful. And what's even better is that if you go, oh, okay, I've now got this pipeline working, sweet. You can then pick your language and it will actually give you the sample of how to build that pipeline. So that's really great for the more visual people. So that's one of the reasons why I like Compass, and all sorts of other things that you can do. But the other thing I like about Compass is that we actually have a command line tool called Mongo Shell or Mongo SH. And Mongo SH is a standalone tool. You can download it separately. You can run it from your CLI tool of choice. But you don't have to. If you want to use the CLI, but you maybe want to mix and match a little bit of UI and command line, it's built into Compass. What's even better is that because you're already connected to a cluster in Compass, when you open the Mongo shell here at the bottom, you don't have to worry about, running the login command and passing your connection string and whatever, and your details to log in. It just takes you straight there because you've already done the authentication. So it's a really great kind of way to be more productive and to mix and match between the two. And then another one, which might be a little bit more unexpected, but is important. It's actually in preview, but it's actually, let's open it up, a MongoDB extension for Visual Studio Code. So a lot of developers, when we write code, we like to just, get our heads down, tap away on our keyboards and write all this code out. And it leads to, maybe you don't want to have to keep jumping between different applications. So you can just browse it inside of Visual Studio Code. But what's even cooler is that you can actually do something called playgrounds. So we can create a new playground, and we can, it comes with some sample code, so you can select the database, insert some data. Now, this database doesn't exist. What's really cool is that if a database or a collection doesn't exist, the first time you go to insert data to it, it will just create it for you, so you don't have to worry about it. So this just gives you an example of what you can do, but you could delete all this and do other things. We've got an example of an aggregation here. So this would be match on any that have a date greater than the 1st of January 2014. It's basically anything in 2014. That's cool. And that's great. It gives you examples of things to play with. So it means that you can even go ahead and play with the code itself inside of this playground without even having to affect your application. So, as anyone that likes to play around in VS Code, I think that's cool. I believe this is still in preview for now, but it is a very, very feature complete, and I absolutely love it. So that's just a handful of ways that you can connect. So many different options. But of course, there's also from your application, which, we have drivers. So if we go back to here, go to overview, we can click this magical connect button. It'll give us some options. So the first time you do it, it would ask you to set up security, but obviously we've already done that. And then you can choose your connection method. So we've got the MongoDB Shell CLI tool that we talked about. You've also got Compass that we discussed. The Visual Studio Code extension isn't listed here, but we do know that it works. You just have to use your connection string, and then you can connect your application. So you can, we have all sorts of officially supported drivers here, like C, of course, C#, Java, Node, Scala, Rust, Swift. There are some other community supported languages. So if you don't see your language listed here, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not supported. It's just not officially supported by us. We do sponsor a lot of the community drivers, but they just won't be as up to date as ours. But we're okay. We're a .NET group, right? So we can do C# and .NET. Just pick the version, and it will actually give you the C# driver supported code that you need for your connection string. And you can even tick this little box here, and it'll even give you an example of how to do it. Neat. So one of the things I love about Atlas is how much it just gives you little examples here of code snippets in different scenarios to get you up and running. Love it. So as I said, we've got drivers as well. So that's pretty cool. So if we go back to here, so we've browsed the data, we've seen the different options that you've got for connecting. Now let's talk about .NET Mongo with the MongoDB. You know, what does it actually look like? You know, what can you do with it? So we have a C# driver. Now, apologies for the size of the text here, but we have two so we've got the MongoDB driver core. So you could grab just the individual bits, but you really don't need it. What you actually want is just the MongoDB driver, which I believe is everything in total, including core, beacon, and any other bits you want. But if you might not be able to see it very well on video, I apologize for that. But this as of taking the picture of the summer, so summer 2021, we are at 50.2 million downloads of the driver. And before that, we actually had a legacy driver called Mongo C# driver, which is at 6.2 million downloads. So yeah, even though SQL to a lot of people is a default database technology for .NET, as you can see, a lot of people actually use this already. So, it's not a fad. It's not like a random idea that someone's had. It's a genuine in production used driver used by literally tens of millions of people. So let's just have a look at a very simple .NET Core Web API example. Not everything needs a front end. So a very simple example with basic endpoints that call to the database. Now, don't worry, this is just about this tiny picture on the laptop. This rainbow slide deck came with these templates for laptops, and you could add the screenshots in, and I was like, well, this is just super cool. I really want to include it. So this is the example, but we'll go ahead and actually have a look at it in action. So if we go over to my terminal here, and we have the example open already, if we just do .NET run, this will go ahead and run it. Give it a second, it's thinking about its life. Oh, okay, there you go. Good old keychain, was it out? There we go. So that's running now. So we're gonna actually go over to a browser. We're just gonna load this tab here, and we're gonna say localhost Swagger index. There we go. So we need to go to Swagger because this is a web API. There's no front end, and so we have different endpoints here. So we've got Swagger, so we can go ahead and try it out, and we can execute, and we'll get back some information in theory. There we go. So I'll zoom in a bit. But we've got Uno, Carcassonne, and Monopoly. So this is, again, using exactly the same connection string as before. All these examples all use the same database because they keep it consistent so you can really see. So we could go ahead and, do more with it. So we could even say, like typical Swagger, maybe we want to delete one. So we don't want Carcassonne anymore. Maybe we throw that out of our games collection. Lockdown's over. We're not spending as much time indoors anymore. So we can try it out. We can give it an ID of the Carcassonne. We can execute it. And boom, it's gone ahead. And 204 deleted. So if we run this again, we should find, there we go, that it's gone. Nice and easy. Super cool. So that's, a web API example. But how does that actually work under the hood? Let's actually look at some code. That's way cooler, right? So we've got this game model, as you'd expect. It's just a class, just like the SQL. It's just a class. But we have these interesting attributes here, which come from the MongoDB driver. So you've got beacon ID, then you've got beacon representation. So as you would have seen earlier in the exercises example, in the document, we had underscore ID. In MongoDB, this underscore ID is something called an object ID. It basically looks like a GUI. MongoDB will take care of generating it for you, but we just need to say to it that this is going to be a representation of an object ID. So when we create a document, we never actually have to worry about giving it an ID. It will auto-generate it thanks to the driver and this attribute. Then if you want, you can give an attribute for the beacon element with a name. So here it doesn't make much sense because both the attribute name and the property and the C# class are the same as the same case thing. But in the event this is different, this is where you can go ahead and match the two together, which is really helpful. And then we've got things like decimal and string. So, it's just bog standard C# model class, nothing fancy. Then we have a services class. So we have dependency injection with our games database settings, which stores things like the connection string, the name of the collection, and the name of the database. So we just go ahead and create a new client with the settings, connection string. Then we get the database the specific database that we want, and then we go ahead and grab the collection. So we know that we're looking at the right collection of documents, because a database can have multiple collections, as you saw. And then we've got the CRUD endpoint. The most basic operations you want with the database, right, is CRUD: create, read, update, delete. So for create, it's just a method, as you'd expect, of a game type, and it takes a game and it just calls insert one. And then if you want to, you can return the game. So you might want to return the game if you want to maybe display attributes from it, like, oh, we've created this game, here's the ID for it. If you've got a front end, it might be, success, here's the document ID. Awesome. So, just insert one. Simple as that. One method from the driver to just create the game. Then we've got read. So if you want to read all of them, we can just use link. Nice and straightforward. So we're saying that we want a list of games, and it's going to be a method called get. Doesn't take anything in, but what it does is it just calls games.find, passes in game.true. So find in MongoDB is how you can go off and do things like select what you can do filters, for example. You can pass it in a filter that says only get this information, or you can pass it a project, which basically specifies what properties you want, because it might be that you've got a document with 50 plus fields or properties, but you actually only care about a subset of them for that specific scenario, so you can pass it a project. But in this case, we're just saying, get game is true, because actually we just want everything. Then, because it's a list data type in C#, just convert it to a list. Cool. One line, couple of methods with a lambda function, and that is how you get all the games back. Or if you want to get a specific one, you can pass it an ID instead. So you just say game's got fine, but this time, rather than saying game is true because you want everything, we're doing that filter I talked about, and we're saying get back get the first or default for game where the game ID matches the ID passed in. Update. Again, very simple. We just give it the ID of what we want to update, and then we give it the object of the new game we want. So that does technically, it doesn't differentiate between what properties have changed. But honestly, MongoDB performance is so good that you won't notice. So that's awesome. So we just replace one. We say in this case, we're replacing the one with that ID, and we're giving it a new updated game object. Then we've got delete by object. So you just pass in the object. You call delete one. Yeah, as you can see, there's a pattern forming here. They're all very similar. You just called, delete one, delete many, update one, update many. There's lots of different operations that you can call, and our docs have got them all listed, which is great. So we've got our game, and we've got a game for deletion. And again, if we want, we can delete by ID. So rather than having to pass a whole object and using the object's ID, we can just pass it in a string of the ID to delete. It's entirely up to you how you want to do it. It's flexible. So that was a web API example. Cool, fine, pretty simple stuff. Blah blah. It's just a web API. Give us some front end jazz. So I saw that my good friend Geometric Jim is in the audience, so I apologize for the accessibility nightmares you're about to witness. I did not make this site. But we're going to have a look at .NET Core MVC, or Model View Controller. So if anyone's watching who isn't necessarily a .NET developer by default, MVC it's kind of an architecture, but it also just means it has a front end. There's other ways of doing front end, but I like MVC. And so this is going to be using the mflix sample data that we looked at before. And it's, as I said, it's available to any of you that creates a cluster in Atlas. And this is what it looks like. We will go ahead and have a look at it properly, don't worry. But it is essentially like IMDb. So let's just go ahead and have a look. So if we kill off this one, so we free up the port. We come over here to here's what I prepared earlier. Run this. This will go ahead and run. And again, this is pointing at the same data. But one of the things I like about this that's pretty cool is that, there you go. It needs a minute for the other one to finish freeing up that port. All right, fine. Okay, so we go to 5,000 now. Should be able to go to Mflix. Here we go. Boom, Mflix. So yes, this is probably an accessibility nightmare, so apologies, but these are just samples. But as you can see, we've got information here. But one of the reasons why I like this as a demo app is because it shows the flexibility of a flexible schema. So it's okay that some of these are so old from the 1920s that they don't have an image for the front. Okay, some do from the 1920s, but not every, for whatever reason, not every piece of document in your collection might have all the information, and that's okay. You can just decide to handle it. It doesn't mean that it's going to blow up. You just find a way to handle it. So in this instance, it just says image failed to load, and that's cool. So it can handle it, but you can go in and you can view more details. So you've got it's directed by, the runtime, the ratings, the genres, the casts. So we saw that before as that array. So all this information is available in the Mflix sample database. They just choose who to display it in this format. Apparently this the play version of this Salome was written by Oscar Wilde. I was in Dublin last week. Oscar Wilde is Irish, well, was Irish. So that's quite fun. But yeah, there's also things you can do, and there's a search box. You can do, I don't know, what have I watched recently? This is too old to have in Canto. I don't know, do Disney, see what we find. Find anything from Disney? Yeah, there you go. So I've just put in Disney and it's found anything related to it. And I think that's cool, just using the sample data set that comes out of the box, you're able to create a whole application, which it's great. If you're just learning and you don't have a whole fancy data set, the sample data set is a great way to get up and running. But speaking of learning, let's talk about MongoDB University. So MongoDB University is our free learning resource. And the reason why I mention it now and not later on is because the Mflix sample that you just saw there was created using a course on the MongoDB University, specifically M220N. So M220 is basically the course for the Mflix sample, but the N specifies .NET because we actually have it in multiple languages and frameworks, which is cool. But I love MongoDB University. As .NET developers, you may know Microsoft Learn. It's very similar. Obviously, it's not quite as large as Microsoft Learn because we're not as big as Microsoft, but it's completely free. It's video recordings, interactive labs, and quizzes, available anytime, all free, and you can get started today. And I love it. I took some MongoDB University classes when I first joined MongoDB, and I frequently actually take courses now just to, either refresh my knowledge on an area or to learn something new, because they've got everything from the very basics in a class called M101, which will get you up and running with your tools and your connections, all the way up to really advanced topics like, performance and index queries, or or Mflix or aggregation frameworks, all those kind of things. So I love it. And shout out to MongoDB University, which the team is actually quite small. It's they are hiring, so they're getting bigger and bigger. So it can only get better, which really excites me as someone who, I choose to, I'm off sick from work today, unsurprisingly. And so I've chosen to use my free time to give this talk because I genuinely love talking to people about things. So not only do I love sharing knowledge, I love learning things. So MongoDB University gets my gold star of the week. Now I want to talk about something called Realm. In the .NET world, you might know Realm as a mobile database, and it did start out life as a mobile database. It was created by a very smart Swedish gentleman a few years ago, and it was intended to be an open source database for iOS and Android. And it still is, but in 2020, I believe it was, MongoDB acquired Realm, and now it's more than just a database for mobile. It's also an application development service. So you've got, it's a database, as they say. So the way it works is it lives on a device, which I think is super cool. It means that if you're on a phone and you're moving around and you're losing network connectivity, That's okay. You know, it won't, your app will still work because it will just use the local version of the database. And then if you've got sync turned on, which is completely free, that means that it will automatically sync. Now, what's cool is even without, automatic sync, it will link to an Atlas cluster. So you don't have to create a whole new database. Say you've got a project that's gone really well, you've got a website and loads of people are using it, or you've got a desktop app and you suddenly have a requirement for a mobile app. You don't need to have a whole separate database spun up just for that. You can just point it at your Atlas cluster, and with sync turned on, it will automatically take care of online offline sync for you. You don't have to worry about coding a load of network stuff. It will just sync between them so that it will always have the most up to date. And in fact, you could even tell it which version to be the priority, local or Atlas. And as I mentioned, Realm is more than just a database now. There's also authentication, so you can do username and username or email and password login, or we even support things like OAuth 2 providers like Facebook, Google, and Apple ID. So that's cool. I think there's even Microsoft support. And then we've got, we've got things like sync, as I mentioned, functions. So that's just like, as you imagine, it's just serverless little pieces of code. Triggers, so you can do things like if a certain event happens, do something. So it might be when a new document is created, do this. We'll actually see this in action later on, and of course the schemas. So yeah, you might have heard of Realm as a mobile database, but it's become so much more than that. And as someone who's a Xamarin developer in my spare time for fun /.NET MAUI these days, I say these days, I tried it last weekend, but yeah, it's super cool. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Realm. Again, could be a whole talk in itself. I've got some really amazing colleagues who do talks on Realm. So if you are interested, reach out to me and I can hook you up with either their content, or I can even get you to come and speak for them. Or not speak for them, come and get them to speak to you. I'm sure us developer advocates, we love speaking. As you can tell, even when we're ill, we still talk. So now I want to talk about an example from Realm. So this is the task tracker app. And actually what's cool is that the getting started with Realm tutorial that you'll find if you have a look online and just search, getting started with Realm, and it supports multiple platforms, you can follow this tutorial. So I followed this task tracker app tutorial that there's two parts to it. There's the set up the backend side of it, which is generic regardless of what front-end technology you then want to use. And then you can pick the front-end technology, whether it's Xamarin or it might be ASP.NET Core. Can't remember. There's also, React if you want to have a bad time of it. React's all right. It's just I love .NET. And I just wanted to show you it quickly. So I've got it on the phone, this iOS device already. So we can just load it up here. And this is what you'll actually create out of the box. The color schemes on this are absolutely atrocious. Again, I didn't make this, but there's, you can barely read what these say. But, you've got my projects. You can, manage your teams. You can add members to it if you want. You can, have a project. You can create a task. So we can say create a task for .NET Devs Austria. And say, okay. And then we can say, that's in progress, for example. So this is all just done using Realms. It's got online, offline sync and everything. And, if you want to see how you can start building a mobile app with Realm, backend functions, that just find the getting started tutorial. As I mentioned, because Realm is more than just a database, you can do lots with it. And as I said, I mentioned that you can use triggers and functions together. So what's cool about this project is that it has, it uses the whole triggers and functions idea. So what it does is it says there's a trigger. If you create a new user, so someone, if you log out, there's a login page here. I changed the colors on this when I did it on stream, but I've not fixed all the other problems. But you can, you can create an account. But the way you do it is the same way as you log in. You enter your email and password, but you just click create a new account. So what it does is a trigger says, okay, when you create a new account, take these details, run a function that will then create a document. That document will then create the user. So then next time you go to log in, boom, the user exists. So it's a really clever use of Realm's application services. But as I said, all created with a getting started tutorial. So if you all of the demos you've seen today, in fact, are all ones that you can do yourself. The first web API example is a demo app that I wrote, but it actually goes hand in hand with a .NET Core and MongoDB Atlas tutorial that I wrote on our MongoDB.com website. And so it's a full tutorial that you can do. So all of these you can do yourself. So now let's just spend a little bit of time talking about MongoDB in action, because we've seen some demo examples, and yes, all right, Mflix is cool and stuff, but it's just a demo. What about some real world action? So this is a game written in Unity that my colleague Nick wrote, which uses, it's just a space shooter game, but because it uses Realm and Atlas under the hood, it's able to store your high scores. So, you know, if you come back to the game after a break, it's not going to forget what your high score was. You can come back to it and your high score will be the same. So gaming is an option. Now, this one I love, right? This is another demo. This was done for our booth at AWS reInvent in 2021. We had, I think it was something like over 20,000 visitors to our booth in a few days. So that was pretty cool, but I might be wrong. But this is a demo example. And this, again, is written using Unity by Nick, but it just adds extra, it's got packs in it for like textures and stuff, so you get these cool characters. But one of the things he also did was have these sprite creators. So each of the characters that you come across in this game, that just, you walk around and you talk to different characters and you learn about MongoDB. But one of the things that you do in it is that you talk to different characters who are all actually my colleagues. So this person right here that you are seeing is actually me. That's right. I'm in a game, friends. And yes, it just got back from chain streaming where it's fast. Absolutely, yeah. Chain streams just means that it's, streams of things coming in. It's really great for things like time series data. But I'm in a game, and that's super cool. But again, it's all written using Unity and MongoDB. And then there's some other examples. So we have, I need to grab the URL for it actually, but we have a bunch of demos now. My colleague Jesse actually put together an e-commerce website using MongoDB, so you can see some examples. But let's just go and have a look at some real world examples outside of my department or my company. So first one I want to talk about is Department for Work and Pensions. So here in the UK, Department for Work and Pensions is a government department that handles best term, like benefits, like social care things. If you need some financial support because you're on low income, Department for Work and Pensions will take care of you. And a few years ago, we moved to something called universal credit. So rather than people having to sign up to different benefits of different things, it just becomes something called universal credit. So every month you get one lump sum that then covers all the different things you're entitled to. And when the pandemic hit, one of the things that happened was a lot of people either lost their jobs or put on furlough, and so their income changed drastically. So there was a massive change in demand for DWP's universal credit stuff. And so that actually uses MongoDB under the hood. And so it needs to be able to scale to meet demand for all this, all these sudden changes, because, we're going into a pandemic. In some countries, including the UK, we went into lockdown. People are suddenly dropping their income. The last thing you need is the stress of trying to get hold of benefits when you need it. And so this is where, universal credit comes in. And I'm pleased to say that we handled the 10 times demand absolutely fine. There weren't any problems. So yes, there were lots of other problems in the world, but accessing universal credit because of an issue in MongoDB under the hood wasn't a thing. Ooh. And if you're interested, there's a whole video on this, and I'll share the link at the end to this page, so you can go ahead and watch it if you like. Change tack a little bit to more industry stuff. This is an article all about Toyota. So in Europe, Toyota have a smart factory where they've got smart forklift trucks moving around to move things in the warehouse. And they moved to using MongoDB under the hood. So this is a really interesting article from Matt Keat, one of our product marketing managers, all about how we moved to using MongoDB under the hood for handling all these different forklift trucks and all the data involved in running the warehouse. So, all this information coming in as well. And it's real time. It's time series pretty much, because it's just constant streams of information coming from all these forklift trucks. But MongoDB can handle it. So that's cool. It's away from credit and it's more enterprisey, but it's smart and it's cool, and it's robot forklift trucks. It's cool to share. And another one is Sega Hardlight. So Sega Hardlight is Sega's UK-based subsidiary for mobile gaming. Every mobile game that you see coming from Sega, like Sonic the Hedgehog, Crazy Taxi, the other two I can think of off the top of my head, but there are others. They come from Sega Hardlight. And a few years ago, they moved to using MongoDB for everything under the hood. So even mobile games that you're potentially using it for any game, like Sonic Dash here, Sonic Jump. I got some good examples. Yeah, it uses originally used Java and MySQL, but they moved to using MongoDB and Atlas. And this article talks you through it. But they needed the scaling that comes with something like Atlas, and so they moved to MongoDB, and they've been using it for all their games going forward. So this article was written in 2018. So by my boss's boss, in fact, I was with him last week. Wonderful person. But yeah, every game now uses MongoDB under the hood. There are some others, some very famous MMORPGs, so massive multiplayer online games. Not always RPGs, sometimes first-person shooters. But yeah, we're not allowed to name names, but just take it from me. Some of those games that you've been playing online, surprisingly, actually use MongoDB under the hood. And I just think that's super cool. So it's a variety of things. You've got sort of social-related things to more industrial to gaming. The possibilities are endless. If you've got data or storage requirements, you will find that MongoDB can support you. So as I mentioned, all of these things are available overall. So today we talked about what document databases are. We had a look at the terms that are different between SQL and document databases, and we saw that great image from my colleague to map the terms. We saw what MongoDB is, including Atlas and Realm. There are some other great products we do as well, like Charts, which allows you to create charts just by pointing at your data sources, your databases, picking the type of graph you want and picking the axes. And then you can embed them in your application. So no need to use third-party graphing libraries. Then we also learned about the MongoDB package, the driver, how many downloads it's got, and how you can get started using it. We discovered MongoDB University, which is completely free. And then we saw some cool examples. So there we go. We are at the end of our whistle stop tour. This QR code that you can see on the screen here, I'll come back to it in a sec, so don't worry if you want to take a picture. It will actually redirect you to this page here. So it's got a link to the slides, university, to the course I took to make MFlix, getting started with Realm, the tutorial I wrote to build that Swagger, that web API backend Swagger example we saw. My colleague who now works, I keep saying colleague, she's not anymore, it still hurts, but she's amazing. She works over at Grammarly now, but she made that mapping diagram, which is beautiful. Our community forums, so they are very active. If you've got any questions at all, if you've got a specific use case, you've got a general question, it doesn't matter. This community.mongodb.com that this link will take you to. Create an account, completely free, get involved. People there from employees to community champions to just members of the community are all there to help you. And then we've got those examples that you saw. And what I am going to do in the next couple of hours is update this gist with links to things like the customer examples, so you can see some or just more general demos like my colleague's e-commerce. So if you want to see some just different types, there's also we have Atlas Search, which allows you to use Luce's Apache Luce under the hood, so it allows a full text search of your data out of the box. You just have to configure it with a couple of simple options. My amazing colleague Karen did a restaurant finder using search. So again, that's another example you can get. So give me a couple of hours and this will be updated with a link to that page as well if you're interested. But I'll come back to the QR code. And if anyone's got any questions, I will do my best to answer them without choking.
So yes, we got some questions in the chat, and I think one just answered, but to be sure. So we
So
got
just,
from
okay, is there an app with support
McCravies.
for full text search? Yes.
Exactly that.
MongoDB Atlas Search is your friend. If we go back to the browser, MongoDB Atlas Search. So yeah, we have Atlas Search. This is just an article about it, but we've got docs and all sorts. We've got examples and tutorials you can follow. But yeah, you can build search at scale, all out of the box. And and it just talks you through it here, and you can do indexes and stuff. But yeah, it's all there. Let me I'm not right. I'm just gonna. I'll pop a link to this in the chat. I don't have the ability to post this to you from the account, but if you, let me just put this in. Yeah.
So
Right. Apologies if anyone spoke to me. By the way, I've just realised my speakers went into sleep mode while I was talking. I didn't even notice. I can hear now. Promise.
Good. Good. I forwarded the link. So next question from Toefrog.
I love Toefrog. Toefrog's one of my favorite people in tech. For devs who may be using something like Entity Framework, traditional SQL database, or possibly other document DBs, are there suggestions or guidelines for moving over to MongoDB? Yes. So one of the things I'd recommend is watching Lauren's. I'll find a link to it. Lauren's talk on From Tables to Documents. But that talks about data modeling. So one of the first things you want to do is to start thinking about how you might want to model your data. Then one of the things that you can possibly consider is moving to maybe do some parallel stuff. So the first thing will be obviously looking at the shape of your data and how you might want to move it over. But another useful tip is it's just to maybe do it in parallel. So what's cool is that we now have something called Data API, which is in preview, but it's still pretty cool. So what you could do is, all right, it might be down for maintenance. But yeah, so Data API basically gives you an HTTP endpoint that you can call for your data. So if you don't need to do a whole application with a driver, or maybe you're in a scenario like IoT where you don't have a driver, you can go ahead and set up a Data API endpoint for your data. It'll give you a URL. You just create an API key. So you could even do things like my colleague John Page did this as a fun example. He actually started to do stuff with doing it from stored procedures or even from a Excel spreadsheet. Yep, you can literally write your data from an Excel spreadsheet. But yeah, you can do all sorts of things with it. So you can do Google Apps, you can do Christmas trees. There you go. You've got Excel. But one of the things you could also do is do it from a stored procedure. So if you've got a stored procedure for handling your data, you could, as long as you can call it an HTTP, which you can do from SQL, you can just send the data over. So you can start to migrate in parallel. Yeah, a lot of it would depend on the size of the data. I believe we potentially have some migration tools, maybe, but don't quote me on that. There are certainly some articles out there that talk about things like moving from Cosmos DB, because Cosmos DB, although it gives you the option to create a document database with Mongo API, I think it only passed about 33% of our integration tests. It's not monitored or maintained by us. So absolutely use Atlas if you want to use the cloud. But if you want to move over, there are some ways of doing it, like parallel movement, or not parallel movement, parallel processing. So, maybe store the data in both places for a while. It all depends on the size and shape of your data, really, but it is entirely possible.
Good. Thank you. Two other questions. So Meinrad asks, how is performance of MongoDB in comparison to, say, PostgreSQL when updating millions of documents?
I mean, it's a bit like comparing apples and oranges, really, when you consider that the data is in a completely different shape. But MongoDB performance is good. Yeah, like if you're doing updates on large amounts of data, of course, there might be some, performance setbacks because it's millions of documents. I don't have exact comparison numbers between the two, but yeah, you're certainly not going to see worse performance in MongoDB. And if you are, for whatever reason, it wouldn't be considerably different. But one of the things that's good about MongoDB because of documents is it does depend on the shape of the documents and how you've got it modeled, because you might have embedded documents, you might have if you want, you can almost have say you've got a document with millions of fields. It might be, I don't know, say you've got a document, for example, that's listing someone's Twitter followers. Maybe they've got really popular, they've got millions of followers. You might not want to store all the list of their followers in the one document because it'll get too large. So you can start to do things like overflow documents. That YouTube video I shared about from tables to documents, changing your database mindset from Lauren, worth watching because she talks about some data modeling strategies like that. So yeah, if you kind of try and do optimal data modeling, there's no reason why the performance will be any worse than Postgres at all.
Good. And the last question we got is, I can't pronounce the name. Is there something like a DB trigger where, for an example, can put some logic ledger on that will immediately run, or I'm thinking too much SQL?
Yes, not at all. Database triggers. That's where you can either do data, so you can do it from Atlas or you can do it in Realm. We have triggers. So you could set something up that says when something happens, do this. So you can add a trigger. Anyway, and you can do a scheduled one, or you can do it based on an event. You can link the data source, the name, depending on which operations it will trigger on. No, absolutely. Database triggers are your friend if you want that.
Cool. And we got a follow-up from question from the same person. With Realms, am I specifically able to limit what gets synced? Atlas will all have data, but my device does not need, for example, user information of another user's device.
Yes, it is a new feature that's come out very recently called Flexible Sync. So you can pick what parts of your data are synced and what aren't.
Cool. That's awesome. That makes the whole stuff.
I like
easier.
this. Every question so far I've been able to give an answer to that goes, yeah, we can do this. There you go.
Yeah, and last one from the same person. Having a grown SQL debate that you take over in a project is a big challenge. However, due to how SQL works and with its constraints, it looks to me that those constraints will help. But if I have a MongoDB that has grown for 5 years, it looks to me this can be an even bigger problem. Can you ease his mind or her mind somehow? It's a two-part.
Okay, sorry, I've just loaded YouTube on my phone so I can quickly have a look at this message written down. I'm not good with audio. I'm better. I can read.
Yeah, it's quite long.
Yeah, you take over in a project. Yeah, how would you just? Well, yeah. So the thing is that it can be flexible if you want it to be, but if you want to put constraints on it, you can. So if you're worried about it getting a bit out of hand over 5 years because you've not got any schema validation or constraints on it, you can add some.
He means database constraint in this case, not that the technology.
Yeah. I don't really understand what you meant. Yeah. You can put constraints on if you want to. I said it gives you. The great thing is that you got we call it a general purpose database because you can use it for different things, but you can use it in different ways that suit you. So if you want to apply constraints, apply constraints. It's just that it has the advantage that you don't have to have constraints if you don't want to.
Good. And with that, I think that were the questions. So, and with that, I take over again. So first, Luce, thank you for spending your time with us, giving us this good overview and in-depth info about MongoDB and documents. Also, thanks from the chat there and for this, and that you get better.
Thank you.
What every speaker from us is getting is I will send you a custom coaster with our logo.
Nice.
So, yeah, if you get a postal address, I will send one to you. So, as a small thank you from us.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for persevering with the coughing and the dodgy voice. I really love sharing about MongoDB with people. So, and like the thing with getting sick is that you don't really know until the last minute that you're too sick to do something. So I was like, I'm going to persevere because I can't do this to the .NET community.
Thank you for doing this, Luce. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Again. Good. Yeah. Thank you all for joining today. What we will do, because some people already asked, so let's do the draw of the JetBrains license. I quickly need to share some other window, and this is not that easy. One moment. Giveaway tool. So let's see who wins the JetBrains license. Emanuele Tonioni, congratulations for winning. Please reach out to me at the email address. I post now in chat, and I will send you your JetBrains license in the next days. And with that, back to PowerPoint. Yeah. Once again, thanks to our sponsors, OK Software and Services, Theater Every and Rubicon, and JetBrains for the license. Next meetups, we're still looking for speakers for the next meetups, but we will always found someone, so there will be some April and May and June meetups for sure. Please spread the word that we are existing and doing this. Invite colleagues, friends, customers, retweet our stuff. Invite everybody that has something to do with .NET to our meetings. That would be great. Again, the links to all our places in the internet. Where you can find us. And then my mouse was react. So something is not really happening here. Luce, can you still hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. My browser just froze, or my computer just froze. I can't move the mouse. Nothing works anymore. Now something is doing. What is happening here? Two slides, and then it will be over. What the heck? So, I see a mouse somewhere. Something is happening. What the heck? So, now it's working again. I think so. is this? At least we have the technical problems at the end of the meetup.
True.
Oh, come on. There's the mouse. So, yeah, only one slide. We want to hear your feedback, and this is also where you can have the chance to enter the raffle for the T-shirt, for the Hey Friends T-shirt. So, and now quickly post the link in chat, where you can fill out the form, and yeah, and we will raffle one T-shirt and send it to the lucky winner. And with that, we are now at the end. Again, thank you all for joining the game. Thank Luce for spending time with us, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.